And now for some bike packing that started at the Carteret Motor Speedway. Looking it up, it looked like it was America's prettiest short track. It was pretty interesting to actually camp in the middle of a racetrack, but it was pretty pleasant overall, I would say, except for the roosters that you'd hear at about 3 in the morning. Beautiful sunrise. It rained the night we started the camping, but it was gorgeous after that, so not too bad. And you actually got to see the bus where you'd pick up your swag at the end of the Croatan Buck 50. We started out with a little debrief. This was the long weekend, which started out prior to the Croatan Buck 50, which was pretty interesting because it was kind of a concept, and so we really didn't know how it would go. We had a route that we were following, but it was basically just 11 people on our way to do some riding. You started out on the actual racetrack, which was kind of fun, before peeling out onto a road for just a little while. The first few miles, nice, settled in, and you're kind of cruising along on some residential roads right around the speedway, which were pretty uneventful, before finally starting the gravel, the legendary gravel of the Croatan Buck 50. The bikepacking route pretty much followed it the entire way. I think by the time we'd gotten back to the speedway on Friday evening, we'd done most of the course. And it was nice to actually kind of have a feeling for what the race was actually going to be like. And it was a lot like this that you can see. For the most part, pretty nice roads. There were some potholes like you can see right here, some pretty huge puddles that were relatively easy to avoid, but you really always had to be paying attention because the minute you took your head away from the road, you inevitably ran right into a pothole or something terrible that you'll see later. Coming up here, we actually got to stop at Stella's convenience store. I think we stopped both days, and it was pretty magnificent to go in and just get really all manner of junk food, everything that we could buy. And then we jumped back on. This whole trip was leading out to Flanner's Beach Campground, which was pretty nice. It was a gorgeous campground, actually. Really enjoyed my time there. And you can see that riding on the roads, it kind of varies quite a bit. So some sections were really nice and peaceful, and some were full of holes. And we occasionally got to stop and look at some pretty sights. The bikepacking route actually led us around quite a few different places that were kind of off the beaten path for what you would normally see. There's my buddy Rob. He was riding his Surly Midnight Special. He rode that in the bikepacking route and the Croatan Buck 50, and it did amazing, so shout out to Surly there. And we got to ride in a group a little bit, but we got pretty strung out during the day. Here's a pretty view of the water. As you pull up to the docks, there's some nice little camping spots and some nice little pull-offs, and so it was definitely an area I hadn't gotten to see before, and it was really nice to actually get to see it. And here you have what is, in my mind, kind of now the legendary Catfish Lake Road. I feel like I spent hours on just this road over those 3 days. It's a massive, massive gravel road. It's basically a 6-lane highway that kind of cuts right through the middle of Croatan Forest, and it's gorgeous and it's really nice. It's full of washboards. You can see in this image that there's definitely a nice hefty little bounce as I'm riding through it. I definitely found that riding on the side in this direction, you can see right now, riding on the side of the road definitely made for a nice smoother path. And it's gorgeous, but also there can just be some deadly headwinds. The very first lap of the Croatan Buck 50 on Saturday just felt like it took forever on this road because you're just riding straight into the wind for so long before turning off. And the good thing about this route and the Buck 50 race itself is kind of as soon as you got tired of any kind of condition, the road would change. And so it feels like you're forever on the Catfish Lake Road, and then you turn and now you have an entirely different kind of road surface, and so that was nice. It kind of kept you on your toes the entire time. And there's a boat, lots and lots of things. We saw washing machines, mattresses, and almost everything had a hole in it from where it gotten shot. You can see this section through here. This was pretty beastly looking because I don't know if you can notice in the image there, but it's a huge mud puddle and it's also full of bricks. These are pretty heavily used Jeep roads, and so I think some enterprising citizens had come out and tried to fill it in some, and so that was definitely the hole that I did not want to fall into, which was just a giant mud puddle full of bricks. This was a pretty interesting stretch through here because it had just recently rained, and I think it's a good example of what the conditions are like. You can see that all the puddles pretty much fill up with water. It was almost actually easier to ride when those puddles were there than it was without them, because at least you could actually see where the holes were. I found it a lot harder once things had actually dried out some to actually tell where the really big drops in elevation came from. But it also required, you can see here, that you pretty much have to use the entire road, and you always have to be paying attention. So it can kind of be a little bit mentally taxing just to constantly be looking out for holes and looking for the best line. Surprisingly, I didn't have any crashes. I was really honestly shocked to have that happen. Definitely saw a little bit of carnage on Saturday at the actual Buck 50 race. I know there were more than a few injuries because you really do have to be watching all the time, and then sometimes it's just bad luck. And then after about 70 miles, give or take, we stopped at a Harris Teeter, which is pretty magnificent in Newborn. You come into Flanders Beach Campground, which is fantastic. I would highly recommend that campground to just about anybody. You can't quite get to the Neuse River access right now because it's still getting over some damage from the hurricane. But it's fantastic. It's has tons of sites, everything that you might need. It's got nice showers. It's got great bathroom facilities. The sites are all really great, and we really enjoyed our time there. We had a big block of campsites that had been reserved for this trip, and so it was nice to kind of go through and relax and enjoy not being wet since the night before it had kind of poured on us. And here you can see where the Neuse River actually empties out into the ocean. I was pretty surprised. Live in Raleigh, and it's pretty amazing to see what the Neuse River becomes by the time it actually gets to the ocean. And then it was time to just sit back and relax and have a beer that I'd taken from the Harris Teeter, which was pretty nice. Pretty beautiful sunset that evening. We woke up and got a relatively early start. The good thing about starting early is that you can kind of try to avoid a lot of those headwinds that I knew that we'd be facing later that day, because we had about 70 miles heading back, all the way back to the campground. So it was just a matter of getting on the road and getting it done. And here you can see a section. I think the only people who did this on the actual race were the ones doing the entire Buck 50 route. It was really nice gravel, but you definitely felt alone. You felt kind of far away from everything, which wasn't a bad thing at all. But this was kind of the loop that only the Buck 50 riders were doing. And then it was time to get back on Catfish Lake Road. You see, it got a little squirrely right through here. Every turn was kind of like that you were constantly reminded that you were on sand, which was a healthy thing to respect. And then we had some detours off of Catfish Lake Road. We would just kind of ride out see some sights, get to some water, inevitably see a mattress or a washing machine shot up, before kind of merging back onto that main road that just cuts straight through everything. This was an interesting section. It's a little out and back on a waterfowl impoundment. We didn't have to do this on race day because I think this section of the course was reserved for the ones doing the buck. It was tough. It was a challenging one because you can see here we definitely slowed down, and it really felt like there was some sand and some grass here that just kind of grabbed your wheel, so you were almost always riding on what felt like a flat tire. We encountered a few obstacles, not too bad. Everything out there seems relatively well maintained. Here you can see a tree that was kind enough to actually fall and split right down the middle with just enough room for a couple of cyclists to get through.
As fate would have it. Thanks, tree. Something else up there. If they're laying pipe. Yeah, and I don't think we're on the course now.
Actually, I don't think you do when you're riding on this side of 58.
Oh yeah? Like over here at all? I don't know if we can do this.
This, however, was a larger obstacle. It looked like they were installing a pretty massive drain pipe, and so we had to dismount and carry our bikes through a small ravine before joining up on the other side.
Just text Fred, don't come.
I believe everybody who did any length of the race for the Croatan Buck 50 will definitely vividly remember this section, which essentially just felt like sort of a single track mountain bike cyclocross little section, which you turn off right by the Stella gas station or convenience store. And then all of a sudden you're on what kind of felt like a rooty little leafy mix. And then you're just riding through a bunch of sand and what felt like sort of eternal washboard. This is basically going through just fields, and so suddenly you'll switch from really bogged down loose sand into riding perpendicular to a bunch of washboards, which isn't fun, and so this was definitely a challenging section of the course.
This is fucking cyclocross.
And then you join back into the woods. I can't imagine what this was like for the really, truly fast folks, you know, Ian Boswells of the world. They moved through here pretty quickly, I would imagine, but it was interesting if you ever faced any oncoming traffic, you really had to kind of negotiate that. So it was definitely fun and broke up the pace a little bit, but it was certainly challenging. Here we are in the legendary Sector 4. I didn't get a lot of great video, and honestly the conditions on race day were pretty different from this. You'll see, I think it's about 1.5 miles, 2 miles long, and it's black dirt, and eventually you just get through some sections that either you had to dismount or you just kind of had to find your way through. On race day, because I did the Buck 50, I actually ended up going through it 4 times. And the last 2 times I was actually able to just kind of punch straight through. Sometimes you have to actually get off onto the side of the road, and sometimes you just have to really kind of just stomp it with some watts to push through. But the better bike handling you have, I think the easier you found it. This was definitely an interesting section of the race.
What's that? Yeah. You have to start
And then you're back on the speedway. You come through the finish line. You actually get a chance to kind of see everything. There's the finish line straight up ahead. It's a really interesting start and finish. And then it was nice to actually get set back up, let everything dry out, and eat some food. There was some excellent barbecue on Friday evening before the race, and that really helped to refuel things before we actually had to start off on Saturday at 8 a.m. And you can see here, I didn't get much actual race footage because I was focused on actually riding, but you can see huge turnout. Conditions were really great. It was sunny all day, some headwinds, but that's to be expected. And so all in all, it was a pretty fantastic trip that led up to a pretty great race.